All right. Welcome, folks. Welcome back to Larger, Freer, More Loving. As always, I'm Matt Levine.
I'm Dwight Lewis.
And it's really, really good to be back with y'all. For those who are new to us or for those who don't remember, this is a podcast that Dwight and I started with the goal, the hope to aid ourselves and others in a journey toward living a larger, freer, and more loving life. And we want to do this through critically engaging pop culture and the academic world around us and the political and social world around us, where we're focusing on things like justice, care, the arts, and community. And I really wanted to remind you all of that because we've been away for quite some time.
Long. Too long. It's so nice to be back, y'all. It's so nice.
Yeah, right.
Sorry. It's been a wild year for both of us. Which is part of the reason why we are having to do this welcome back, because it has been a year almost.
Right.
Since, maybe a little bit over a year since our first podcast. But it is so nice to be back and for both of us to be settled somewhere.
Yeah, right.
Part of the reason that we haven't been around is because we've both been going through a lot of transitions this year.
Yeah, right.
And we know everyone, we're not prioritizing our transitions over other people's. We know everyone is going through transitions and hard stuff. And so don't be afraid to give yourself a break, to begin with. But just to give you a little inside scoop on what's been going on.
Yeah, right. Where you been at? What's been happening since we've last done an episode?
Yeah, so I've been all over. If you followed me at all, my journey in academia has been all over the place. I've now been I'm at my fifth university in the last 5 years. And so what ended up happening for me is that I was at the University of Central Florida, and I am now at the University of Minnesota. And so I'm transitioning from, right now, in January, it's high 70s, 80s. And right now outside, it is in the negative teens, negative 20s.
And you got snow all around.
We got snow all around. This is insane. Yeah. So I went from, very different environments. I am excited to be where I'm at. Of course, the transition to a new place is hard. And it's hard when you've been transitioning 4 or 5 times in a row. And full cross-country moves, not next door moves. I went from Florida to Atlanta, back to Florida, to Pennsylvania, back to Florida, to here. It's I've just been all over. Transitioning is hard. It is very hard. Learning new processes, finding friends, dealing with your loneliness, and then, you're still dealing with the weight of your job and the many hats that, you wear, especially in academia. Of course, there's a lot of jobs where you wear a lot of hats. But it goes all the way from, I'm doing a podcast today. I was working on a paper earlier yesterday. I'm getting a text and a call from a student at 6 p.m. trying to help them with their applications for grad school.
Right.
It's it's all over the place.
All the while you're trying to deal with all of these transitions and the reality of moving and being a human being and having these feelings and having these needs for other people that I so appreciate you mentioning, because academics don't like to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, part of my transition was really attempting to live out our mission to some extent, larger, freer, more loving. There was some things about where I was at before that I didn't feel that I could fully step into living larger, freer, more loving. Minnesota has felt so far like a place where I can, and I hope that it continues to feel that way for sure. Now academia, I got a whole nother problem there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if this place is, really about love, care, or progress. Like, I just don't know if it really is anymore. Before we got on this, me and Matt were actually just talking about, what it looks like to work outside academia, and what are the options. And part of dealing with these transitions is also talking about Matt's transition in relationship to academia. So Matt, tell us what's been going on, especially the last 4 months, but over the last year.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And first, actually, I do just want to say, like, congratulations, Dwight. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's awesome that you got this job. Like, you got grad students. Like, this is crazy shit. And like, and you're doing this in a way where you're talking about stepping into and living into integrity at the same time. Like the fact that you have been able to get where you have while living in integrity in the ways that you have is inspiring as hell to me. And
you bring up that, and it's hard because you get tired. And integrity is something that, like, you not only have to you have to work on it, you have to, it's like, and being genuine it's like, it can come natural, but even when it comes natural, it's still something that you have to like put some effort into. And then when you're doing all of these other things and you're transitioning, I feel like I've struggled being true to myself over the past year, especially the last 6 months, because of this exact and which is why I haven't been able to be as like on top of stuff, even in relationship to the podcast. I appreciate you because I need what you just said made me feel good. Like, not like feel good inside, but like a good person. And sometimes it's hard to feel that way, especially when, it's like at times you need to be selfish. And I probably should be like more selfish in particular ways and less selfish in other ways right now. And I think, it's just hard. And so I appreciate it. I really do.
Good. And I mean, so it's interesting too, like, so where have I been the last year? Well, so since we did our last episode, I've been on the ground and in the streets a lot. That's been really given me life. But also,
you were at the beginning, like when we first stopped, you were doing like a protest every day, right?
So I would say I'm probably at a protest 2 to 3 times a week right now. And really, part of that for me is again, this idea of larger, freer, more loving, right? This is a reference to Baldwin and an homage to Baldwin. And for me, actually, a big part of what connects with me about protesting goes back to Baldwin too, with this idea that not everything that's faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced.
Yes.
Right. And for me, protest is this really important communicative action where, part of it for me is wanting to be out in the streets, reminding Black and Indigenous and people of color folks that I haven't forgotten about the fact that we live in a white supremacist system that is intent on destroying these communities. But also it's about a communicative act for me to other white folks that, like, hey, you can be sitting there trying to go about your daily life and trying to ignore all of the white supremacist and colonial fuckery around you, but I want you to remember that that's happening. And that for me is a big part of what protest is about for me, is that never wanting myself or other white folks to stop having to face this system that we need to change so badly.
Yeah. It's funny because I think that this, even what you just said, pulls all the way back to last season when we were talking about what it meant to be a committed white ally, right?
Yeah, right.
And some of that, a lot of that, if we want to talk about this in relationship, and here we go way too academic, but if we want to talk about this relationship to like negative and positive liberty, right? Negative liberty is something that you're going to get through laws. Positive liberty is something where you believe that you can do the thing, right? And we know this as a fact that like the laws haven't changed things, right? And so what we need is people to believe that they can do a thing, and if the laws don't do it, then we have to do something in the society.
So
right?
much the worse for the laws.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's like what you're doing in protest is like attempting to give people positive liberty. Right. What you're attempting to do is like push back, make a social pushback that's saying things that are not fighting against white supremacy are not valued in this space. Right. And if we can like get a whole bunch of people to do that in a community, then it's going to push it out. And we may be feeling it largely from like overarching community, but we can do that in small communities, right? And then if we get those small communities to then get bigger and larger and larger and larger, then we can have this like social move push back on white supremacy in a way that you're not like, it doesn't matter how much we change the laws, if the society doesn't change, then we're getting nowhere. And so I like really appreciate what you're doing. And I think it like ties in to like our past season, but also it like leads people hopefully on to something new, which is that like, yeah, policy is great. And we should definitely be fighting policy, 100%. But there's things that you can do even if you're not fighting policy and voting. Everyone just wants to put so much weight on voting. And it's like, well, there's a lot of things that you can do outside of voting. And it may not even be like working at a food pantry. It may not even be like doing these things for those people that are less fortunate, right? It may be actually standing up in your, and I want to cuss, but I'm not going to, in your freaking community, right? It may be actually standing up in your community and not allowing things to happen in your community. And that's literally what you are doing. You're standing up in your community 2 to 3 times a week and being like, this isn't allowed in my community. I'm sorry, that's BA. You know? Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. And it's interesting too, right? Like, so as you were talking there, one of the things I was thinking about is like, there's a very bizarrely kind of promising or optimistic way we can take the fact that white supremacy is so freaking pervasive. Like, what I was thinking about there is like, white supremacy is so pervasive. There's a 1,000,000,001 different ways to fight it, right? Like, right. And what I was thinking about here too, right? Like there are personal manifestations, personal and interpersonal manifestations of racism. There are cultural manifestations of racism. There are institutional manifestations of racism, right? And like, we need people working on all of those things, right? And because like as you were talking about there, like white supremacy is such a weirdly shape-shifty kind of thing that like, even if you've got the personal and the cultural, but you don't have the institutional work you're doing against it, white supremacy will find a way, right?
Yeah.
If you're just doing the cultural and the institutional, white supremacy will find a personal outlet, right? So we need people working on these personal manifestations of racism. We need people working on these cultural manifestations of racism. We need people working on these institutional manifestations of racism. We need people working on these ideological manifestations of racism.
100%. Yo, couldn't have said it better. All right, so
this is
I'm still in all your time, but I'm still gonna be like, all right, So you've been protesting. What else have you been doing?
Yeah. So this is a perfect time, actually. So these thoughts I've been bringing in here around personal, cultural, and institutional manifestations of racism is very, very much an homage to what I've been doing professionally recently.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Professionally.
Yeah. So I'm out of academia.
Hey!
Yeah, so for the first time since spring 2004,
Wow.
I had no connection to academia in fall 2021. And that's because for me, in the particular things I was trying to do in the particular context I found myself, I couldn't live in integrity in academia anymore. And so
I'm in this rub now.
Right. Yeah. So I got a job at this absolutely freaking awesome organization in what is now known as Portland, Oregon, the Center for Equity and Inclusion. And this is an organization that works on systematic approaches to race equity. And so what I'm doing there is I'm a race equity facilitator and consultant.
Yo, it's bad. Hey.
So I mean, it's awesome. Like this is an organization that the theory of change behind the organization is that we can't do race equity work in sort of off the cuff, one time, check the box kind of ways. We've got to be coming at this with the goal at the outset being transformational change of the places we work and live. And right behind that, at the Center for Equity and Inclusion, we really focus on the fact that what transformational change means is change on that personal front, change on that cultural front, and change on that institutional front, all in a way that moves our identity toward being race equity at the front of our value system. And I mean, so sorry, I do have to jump in, run real quick. So one of the things I love about this organization, in addition to this awesome work they do, it is a BIPOC owned, led, and centered organization. And I am one of the few white folks who works there. And so as a white person working at this BIPOC led, owned, and centered organization, I want to make a disclaimer that all of the views I put forth in this podcast are mine and mine alone. Because right, I want to be sensitive to like there's right, I'm a white guy working at this BIPOC led and owned organization, and there's I don't want to stick the organization with any of my ludicrous ways of looking at the world. So sorry, I needed to get that disclaimer out there.
I will also put a disclaimer out there too. These are my thoughts. They have nothing to do with anything I'm related to. All right. I also burn me down. You like both ways. It's gonna happen either way. The institution is going to burn me down at some point. Y'all are going to burn me down at some point. It is what it is. But so happy. But my question was, why should race equity be forefronted? I know we didn't. I didn't prep this question, just so y'all know. Like, why should this be forefronted?
Race here. Oh, okay. So you're gonna get a long answer on this one, Dwight.
Yeah,
I hope that's cool. So, I mean, this honestly goes back to, for me, one of the foundational lies in the West. One of the foundational lies in the West is the idea of the social contract, right? The idea that what we are doing in a society is or what has been done in our societies is groups of free people have come together to agree to to agree to a set of rules that will limit those freedoms because we think we can do more together as a group than we can each one of us individually. Yeah. Right. So I actually think that sounds great, like, but that's just as a matter of historical fact, not even close to what's happened, right? I'm a big I have been, will be, always will be a big follower of Charles Mills and this idea of the racial contract, that really what we've got going on here is not everybody coming together to agree to a set of rules for everybody for the betterment of everybody. Really what we've had is a racial contract where a certain group of white folks have come together to agree to one set of rules for white folks, a different set of rules for BIPOC folks, to the benefit of white folks and to the detriment of BIPOC folks. So what this means is that, like, in the West, the foundational reason for having a society, for having social groups at all, is to make things better for everybody. But as a matter of fact, what those societies have done is aim to make things better for white folks and worse for BIPOC folks. So for me, like, I happen to love to work on race and anti-racism and fight white supremacy. But frankly, even if I didn't, I think I and certainly every other white person, but I think people generally have an obligation to work on race equity, because that is in some ways the foundational flaw in our society. For me, it's like, if you are a human being trying to live in community with other human beings, then frankly you got to be concerned with race equity. Like
the human in relationship to, at least is what I'm taking from you, the human in relationship to the contract, right? Because a contract is based on humans having these agreements. The human is already a question. What is human? Right? And then not only what is human, but then what, like, and we could even say, oh, well, we characterize or we like typify these people as human. But even in that, who then, even as a human, gets to establish the type of political and moral rules that then end up creating, right, the contract, right? And are these people that we consider human, do they have a voice? Like, do we respect the epistemology that they bring to the table, right? And so these are the things where it's like, what I see that you're doing is, like, what you're trying to do is say, hey, these things have not been valued, and you're bringing them to the forefront. And this is just like one phase of that being done. The organization that Matt is working with is doing this in one way, but there's plenty of organizations that are doing this in a multitude of different ways. And we need it done not just racially, not just sexually, not just in relationship to those people that are immigrants, right? Not just in relationship to people that are disabled. We need it in relationship to trans folks all over the place. But this is one aspect where, like, a position that is oftentimes not heard and not felt and not seen, except in ways that are then already predefined by whiteness, actually gets to be placed at the forefront, right? I think, like, the organization is fire. I've actually, I've talked to people at the organization. They are fire also. Like, I am thoroughly jealous of Matt's position. I feel like there's a freedom in being able to do your job, and also being able to do your job and do something that means something, but also walk away from it at the end of the day. And I hate to say this, but academia, right? There's no walking away. It's just like, and you know this from spending, almost 20 years in it, right? It just swallows you whole, and then spits you out, but like as a skeleton, right? Like takes all the nutrients.
So extractive.
Yeah, and it's like, build me up, right? Build me up. It's like, Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's extractive generally, but like to racialize this, like it's especially extractive if you're a black man in academia, if you're a black man in philosophy, like it's the extent to which reciprocity and mutuality is absent from academia, but especially absent from the way white academics treat BIPOC academics, but especially Black academics is horrific.
What we need is your organization working with universities. To be serious, these organizations, like, to be serious, and that's a plug, and I'm down with the plug, because I think there's a lot of spaces that could use, the type of help that your organization gives. And we're talking about plans. We're talking about people that like dive into the actual organization and beat it up and develop actual plans for getting you further along. And I think that's different than someone saying, "Hey, don't do this, don't do that," right? And I really respect. I really respect what they're doing. I really respect what they're doing, and I'm like, yeah, like I said, I'm jealous and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of your ass.
I'm lucky as hell to be in the position that I am right now. I have not felt more lucky or more fortunate than I have in the last 4 months in quite some time, which is a weird experience to have at the same time that like trauma is the name of the game right now. And again, to racialize, like trauma is not being doled out in anything but completely disparate ways right now racially. So I mean, there's I think a lot for me to realize in that, in terms of my obligation for taking this opportunity seriously and trying to fuck up white supremacy in the process. Like I don't yeah, that's one of the things I'm trying to remind myself a lot right now. Like this is not a time to be sitting on my laurels, getting comfortable with the fact that I'm in this awesome position. Like this is a time for me to use that awesome position to try to push myself forward and push others forward in ways that maybe I wasn't going far enough in the past, let's say.
Yeah. So we're talking about pushing forward, but we also I'm talking about the pain of the last year, what's been going on. We were gone for the last year. What are some things, or two things that you wish that we would have done a podcast on in the last year?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Part of some of the things you were saying earlier made me think of something that's been messing with me, and like I would have liked to have us spend some time talking about it. And it's actually I was at a protest just before we recorded this podcast, and I got asked to give a land, labor, and people acknowledgement at this protest. And one of the things I talked about during that was the fact that in 2020, there was something like tens of millions of Americans who got out in the street in some form of Black Lives Matter protest to express, this collective horror at Black men, women, trans women, non-binary folks being murdered with impunity. And that number is nowhere near that now. And I want to say, what in the world do y'all think has changed? If you thought it was important to go out in the streets in May and June of 2020 what has changed that makes it so you are not out there now? That's one of the things. So what I want to talk about is, or one of the things I would have wanted to talk about is the lack of white courage, commitment, and follow through.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And so I want to add, because and the ways that like the pandemic has been like the easiest get out of jail free card in relationship to it. And I'm not saying that, we're not, the pandemic isn't beating us up. But I'm sorry, I don't get to take a break from being Black. Black women don't get to take a break from being Black women in the world. It's like, this is like, there's no break. It's like, I like go to my neighborhood bar and I like end up hearing just wild things. Like, oh, like, why, like, you Black people just should be more worried about the economy than you are about like having than race rights. And it's like, intriguing. Right.
What
So these are right. Like
what a bizarre thing, right? Like,
I agree.
How is that their decision to make for you, for one? Like, I mean, we can talk about the fact that the content of that suggestion is ludicrous on so many different fronts, but just like, what in the world makes us white people think that we get to be the judge of that we get to be this? I mean, 500 years of white supremacy, but right, like, no, that's fucked up.
It is. And it's crazy that it's just like, I'm just trying to have a gosh darn beer.
Right.
Like, can I just like go to the bar and have a drink? Like, Lord. And it just is like, there's never, and that's even an experience where I'm like someone kind of forces me into it. We're not even talking about the experiences where it's like, I am just like doing this in white spaces, trying to like be safe, right? And let people know that like this Black man is safe, right? It's like, we're not even talking about those things, but yeah. I 100% hear you and agree with you on this that yeah. There's got to be follow through,
Right.
and a lot of it has been I had my like binoculars out and I was looking for it, couldn't find it. Pulled out my magnifying glass, still couldn't find it. So I just don't know where it's at anymore. Right. I'm looking.
No, and I mean, so right. So there's the personal aspect of this again, like, where are these individuals? But then there's the institutional side of this too, right? So in the wake of the George Floyd's cold-blooded murder in the streets of Minneapolis, and the public response to this, there were all of these organizations and businesses and all this stuff making these big commitments. We're going to do this, that, and the other thing. And one of my colleagues brought to my attention an article recently that said something like, 1/2 of 1 penny of every dollar that was committed has actually been followed through on. Right. Like, so, yeah, right. So there's this personal lack of follow through and commitment and courage, but there's this institutional lack of commitment and courage and follow through too. Those are some of the things that were definitely messing with me over the last year. That it would have been fun to do an episode on.
So this also, goes into mine too, because I would have loved to do one in relationship to the trials that have been going on, with Breonna Taylor's killer, with Kyle Rittenhouse, right? All of these different trials that have been going on at least last year in 2021. I would have loved to have done podcasts on that. But also, you just made me think of, at the same time that like all these, the riots were going on, I was involved with an organization that was putting together a Black Lives Matter statement. And I remember a meeting with this organization and someone complaining and even crying, non-POC, about not being allowed to be a part of the making of the document. And I was just like, I feel so bad that you don't get to be involved in like creating a statement that helps Black people so much. Like, I feel so bad. I want to hurt for you. I really do. And this is where, I go too far and people hate me. But it is what
But
it is.
no, I think that's important, Dwight, right? So this is a thing, I'm forever frustrated with the ways in which feelings of BIPOC folks are so scary to white folks, and white folks are so quick to throw their feelings out into these spaces. So I mean, if you're up for it, how does that feel to be in that situation?
I'm not gonna lie. I like at the onset, I just started, like I had to turn my camera off and I just started laughing. And it's like, maybe I shouldn't be laughing at like these tears of this person because they quote unquote care. But I'm like, if this is like the thing that brings you tears, like, were you at tears when we heard about the verdicts from Breonna Taylor? Were you at tears when he heard about the verdict of these 3 protesters that were killed by Kyle? Were you like how it's like, but it's like that this brought tears, like peed me off because to be serious, I wasn't even involved in the making of the statement. Right. And I came in as like a BIPOC person. I'm sitting there and I'm like, fine, right. Like, I'm like, this statement's fine. Right. Like, well, that doesn't need to change. It's like, fine. It's like, oh, like, what does this really mean for me? Right. Yeah. I'm glad that you're doing it, but it's like, as we already know, policy, blah, 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 like words, blah, 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 blah. And so it's just like, at that moment, I think you're in, I think people laugh oftentimes when they're in they're in a lot of pain. And I was just laughing because I'm like, I don't even get to feel this way about statements that are made about me. Right. And people like me. Like, I don't get to say, why wasn't I a part of that? Right. It's like they're made all the time. And so I was just like, you have more freedom to be mad about this statement than I do. Right. And I was just like, I can't even. Like, I didn't even put an emotion into it because I couldn't waste my emotional energy on it. And I think that's the way that a lot of BIPOC people are existing in the world, is that they like just can't even. They don't even have, it's like there's just like an emptiness. And I mean, that's also how, the fight gets won oftentimes too, because people are just so exhausted, so tired, so beat up. And so it's like, you're just like, well, this is fine, like whatever. And it's not fine. And it's not whatever. But I actually remember even we would Zoom, because we still Zoom even when we don't do this. And I remember saying to you for months, well, whatever. You remember? I was like, whatever. Like, I've just been, and I feel like I've been, like, I will say being here, it's been a little bit, like, I feel like I've been able to say less whatever, which is nice. For sure. But so I'm gonna move me on because I need to. But I think one of the things I would have loved to have done a podcast on is the insurrection, the riots, January 6th. It is, yesterday was the anniversary. I would have loved it to have done that. Maybe sometime we'll come back and do a 15-minute on it, because I feel like it would be something worth talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a thing that clearly, as much as folks want to pretend this is the case, the things that led to it and the things that result from it are a big part of our lives and are going to be a big part of our lives for quite some time, right?
100%. And then secondly, which we actually are going to try to do this semester, is give some type of student advice. And maybe we're already giving bad advice though, because both of us have already, you left, and I'm not saying that I'm leaving or that I'm going to leave. But who knows what the future is going to be? But who knows?
Who knows?
But who knows what the future is going to hold for me? Yeah, I've got to be convinced to stay here. That's the real thing. This is where this is going to sound arrogant, and I've got to love myself to love myself enough to know my worth, and not only my worth, but what's going to continuously feed me, and not take more than I'm than I'm getting fed. I think academia struggles with that. And it's very antiquated in the ways that it's trying to do its research. And that takes also from the youth, because we're trying to do new, interesting things. We're trying to move us past these journals and these books and really take us to something that is going to speak to people. And they can't evaluate that. And so they can't give you tenure based on those things at most places. And so how then do I stay myself and still do the things that I like? How do I stay myself and also still keep my job?
Right.
And the staying myself isn't just to stay oneself. The staying myself is to move academia and history and society culture forward. And it's I'm not staying myself to hold on to the past. I'm actually staying myself to pull us to the future. It's a hard place to be at.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, right? So the name of our podcast, Larger, Freer, More Loving, right? This is a thing that highlighting it, even though it comes from James Baldwin originally, highlighting it was something you did for me. Right. And this was something you did for me because what I have seen of you is somebody who wants to be larger, freer, more loving all of the time, right? So as you're talking about this, I'm hearing you talking about staying you, and for me, that doesn't sound to me like a fixed thing at all, right? Because what I know of you is you are this person who lives every single ounce of his being into larger, freer, more loving. So staying you is being this person who wants to push forward and make things better for everybody, right?
I appreciate that. And I appreciate the ways you see me. I really do. Because it is hard. It is hard to, it's hard to be seen by whiteness when you're Black. It's hard to be seen by whiteness. And I appreciate the ways you see me. A lot of whiteness seemingly seems to understand the thing. But there's a different thing in feeling it. And I know that you feel it. And I appreciate it more than you know. And more than y'all few people that's listening now.
That's listening.
More than y'all know too. Baldwin even says it, right? Baldwin says there's a few good whites. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but I take that statement to be factual. And it's shown itself to be factual in my life. Yeah. And I appreciate you for being one of those for me. I do. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate it. Now we're gonna get all emotional and stuff on here. And I have nothing wrong with the emotional.
No, and not right. This is one of the things you got to expect from me this season, Dwight. This is one of the things that CEI has been so awesome with me on, is helping me to realize the ways in which in being in academia, I'm so focused on the mind, the theoretical, the abstract, and not paid sufficient attention to body and heart, right? And especially when we're talking about manifestations of racism and manifestations of attempts to fight back against racism, body and heart got to be absolutely centered to that, and that is a learning edge that I am very, very much working on here. So sorry, man, you're gonna have to hear me talk about feelings all the time.
I appreciate it. I'm not even gonna lie. I have been so emotional since like moving up here. I don't know if it's the loneliness or what it is. I literally was a week ago watching Selling Tampa. And I'm on episode 2. This woman is getting divorced, and I'm laying in bed watching this and just crying. My whole heart is in there. I'm you could tell how much she is broken by it, and then it broke me to see her broken like that. And I was and 2 days later, I was crying about something else. I've just been crying lately. It's it is a good thing. But also I think it's indicative of something else. And that's what I need to I feel if the crying is coming out of the blue and ways that are wild, it's because you're hurting somewhere else. And so I got to do some deep diving in myself. So I'm down with the emotions. I am, but
I interrupted you with that though. My bad. Where were you headed?
No. I now I don't even know where I was going, which is great. It's the best type of road to be on, right? You're just walking in and you'll get where you're going. So we've given you a little welcome back. We've talked a little bit about our transitions over the past year, some of the things that we wish that we would have been able to do podcasts on this year. I kind of want to, so we are going to get to a quick recap of season 1 and then give you a little quick preview of what's going to happen in season 2. But I just have one more question for Matt. And it isn't even a focused question. It's again, another open-ended naked question. What is something that you want to highlight, not on the podcast, just in general, that you've learned, or that not even that you've learned that has beat you up, whatever it might be over the past year? Not the transition, not the new job, what is outside of that scope that has been something that has made an impact on you this year, that we haven't been doing the podcast? I know these are all, so just so you know, my questions for all y'all are mostly unscripted. We had a script, but I'm bad at scripts, so just is the case.
No. You're not bad at scripts. You're awesome at being real. That's what the deal is.
I want to hold to the script, but I also want to get to the meat, you.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, and this is this is going to touch on the podcast a little bit, but not in I don't know, professional or theoretical ways, in personal ways. Loss and grief have been a really, really big part of my year, and not just loss and grief in my life, but loss and grief in friends and comrades' lives. But for me, so to connect to the podcast, one of our favorite episodes we've done on this was an episode we did on the question of inclusion in philosophy, with Linda Martine Alcoff and Shelley Tremaine, but also the late Professor Charles Mills.
Yeah.
And Charles passing in September of this last year definitely fucked with me a lot. It's interesting, you know, I said in the piece that I wrote after he passed in honor of him, you know, I said something about the fact I was only ever in space with him and in the same room as him a handful of times. But he has been and will continue to be one of the single biggest influences on my life, and one of the things that, frankly, you know, to get a little naked, I had a friend ask me recently, do you love yourself, Matt? And this was an interesting question for me because as a younger person, I was somebody who hated myself a lot. I had a lot of issues with self-hatred. And one of the things that has helped me move to a space of not hating myself so much, and was Charles's work and the way it inspired me to start living into my values in ways I hadn't been before. So in a very real sense, like, Charles is personally responsible for helping me to not hate myself. Like that's I don't know how you repay a person for such a thing. I don't know how you properly honor a person for such a thing. And that was following up. That was 4 months after another friend of mine, Dr. Lonell Woods, passed away in May of 2021. And
I know, I'm sorry, we're sorry.
Yeah, no.
For those.
Yeah.
We are sorry. We are.
And yeah, I looked up to Lonell in lots and lots of ways that, again, his passing just messed me up a lot, and again in ways that made me go into trying to understand some of my own personal development, and what Lonell meant to me, and what was happening in my life before, during, and after my time with Lonell that made me connect with Lonell in those ways. And also I couldn't help but racialize this too, as Charles and Lonell were both beautiful, talented Black men, who yeah, this just made me think some too about the racialized nature of grief and loss too, and you know, I, as a white person, I am not dealing with the cumulative impact of generations of grief and loss following, underlying that. and also, to be completely honest, this is one of the things that has pushed me in this direction of where has everybody gone? These people that were protesting in the streets, like it's been very, very, it's been very, very real in my head. Like, Black men are still dying. Like, why is that not horrific to you?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, so loss and grief are some things that have been on my heart.
Yeah. Man, this is tough. I also, had known Charles. I'd only met him once outside of our podcast, but he was so gracious in the podcast. Talked to us before, talked to us after. Spent a lot of time. And I know we were talking about him when he first passed, and we were talking about like there's no other like academic that we know that like could do what Charles does. And how oftentimes people can fit in and like take the role. And yeah, like there's an emptiness now in the place of where Charles was. And it's not just for me, but it's also for like academia in general, philosophy in general. And I am like, I'm not just sad for myself, but I'm sad for the discipline, and I'm sad for kids that are coming up after, after me that never even got a chance, to meet someone that like, the thing I respect about Charles the most is that Charles is so good at being poignant and critical in such a way where it's also digestible. And like that all that takes place and you live a life of integrity. Some people are belligerent, and it's like they just like their persona like already loses so many people. Sometimes I may be like that. And I really appreciate how Charles moved in the world. Yeah. I really, yeah, I respect it. And then secondly, you talked about the racialized nature of loss and grief. And I'm so glad you brought this up because, right, we've only got to talk about loss and grief in relationship to people actually dying, but people being pulled out of your community too. So when we want to talk about, Black men, 1/3 of Black men are in, prison or jail, but that also leaves, all these Black women that are related to them in whatever type of way, right? With like loss and grief and the ways that, and it just made me think about the ways that like my own mother and my own sister like have to carry loss and grief in a way that I don't have to carry it. And I'm just like, yeah, like that is, I'm sorry, we don't have, I think there's one male in my family. We had a lot of uncles in the past, but like in a direct line, it's like there's only one male in my family that's over 60, right? All the rest have passed away. And so you like, yeah, when you start seeing the ways that Black men are non-existent and Black women are having to grieve and then still survive in the same ways that my mother had to do this when I was, 14 and my siblings were older, right? She had to deal with loss and grief, but then had to somehow like create a world for her kids to still be able to like, like propel off of. And it's like, that is just a lot. And a lot of Black women in this world, not just in the US, but in this world are like carrying this weight. And I'm sorry, I've just got to say it because, not only for my mother, but also for the billion Black women that are in my life that are dealing with loss and grief and that are building me up. That's something that for us, even this year, we talked about last year. We've been talking about it for the last year. Black women are not highlighted enough in the world. And so I know one of the things, and we're getting ahead, we're not really doing this the way we said we were, but it's fine. This is way better.
That's perfect.
One of the things we're trying to do is actually bring in way more Black women into this into this season. And to some extent, it's like this season is like forefronted.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Anybody in particular you want to highlight there?
So someone that we've been talking with, and we're super excited. It's like 99.9% happening. But Maisha Cherry, hopefully we're gonna have her on next episode to talk about her new text, The Case for Rage, which we're super excited about. Both of us have started reading it. Matt's way further along than me. But we both started working on this. We have a couple other people we would love to have, and we haven't confirmed with some of these people. So, it is what it is. But 2 people for me, and then I know that Matt's going to talk about a few people too, but 2 people for me, Catherine Sophia Bell, and Joy James. So hopefully we'll have both of them on to talk about very different things. Like Joy James, more talking about what it means to be a revolutionary. What does prison and prison abolition look like, right? What is the captive maternal? How do we untangle that? And then with Catherine Sophia Bell, what is it like to how do we actually live our true selves when we're in this space of academia? Is it possible? And what does it mean to step into being the fullest version of yourself? And I think that Catherine does that in a way that I've very rarely seen in people. And I appreciate Catherine in ways that she probably doesn't know either. But it's because she's just a solid, genuine human. And so you just can't, there's no better person to speak in your life, right? No better person. And I am now going to cut you because I'm going to talk again for way too long.
Nah, go ahead.
And it's not even going to be about this, but I'm going back to this "do you love yourself" thing. And it got me right away because I think I respect myself. I think I'm proud of myself, but I don't know if I love myself, right? Yeah.
Oh, it was an unbelievably important question for me because I'm with you. There are some close things that I can say that I have those feelings for myself, but do I love myself is
yeah. And this may sound very bad. Yeesh. Right. I think some days I do exactly what other people do to me. Love the idea of a me. Right. I think that oftentimes I move in the world in such a way where people love the idea of me, but not me. Right. And I think that's similar even for myself. And that's why I respect myself. I'm proud of myself. But do I love me? I don't know. I don't know. So I appreciate you bringing that question up. So now I'm going to ask you, who are you excited about seeing next season? I know you're excited about Dr. Cherry.
Oh, yes. Everybody you mentioned, but also I definitely want to highlight Dr. Claudia Ford. So Claudia is chair of environmental studies at SUNY Potsdam, and Claudia, so whether or not I've mentioned her name on the podcast before, she has been in our space a lot. Any of the ways I'm thinking about things that they go in any helpful or reasonable or humane direction, it's oftentimes got a connection to some inspiration, some motivation, some conversation I've had with Claudia. So I gotta say I'm personally very excited about having Claudia on. But some of the things we're going to talk about with her are connected to some of the things that have come up in our space already. So we're definitely going to talk about the concept of revolution and transformation and real systemic change and what that takes. And one of the things that Claudia has really brought to the forefront of my mind on this front is the ways in which people in the West tend to think of revolution exclusively in destructive terms. And one of the things that Claudia's really got some awesome and interesting thoughts on are in relation to the generative nature of revolution. But also, you know, right? Yeah, right. No, I hear you, man. I hear you. Yeah, but also, you know, we've been talking about wanting to highlight and lift up Black women, and we've been talking about loss and grief that Black women are often left with in this white supremacist world we live in, but also the resilience and the knowledge and the understanding and the ways of being and living that come out of that. And this is one of the things I'm most stoked about talking to Claudia with, is this notion of a grandmother epistemology that she's been working on. And this idea that there are ways of being and knowing connected to the identity of grandmother, and in particular the identity of Black grandmother, that we really want to center, we really want to uplift, we really want to learn from. And this is some of the coolest shit I've been seeing anybody work on in quite some time. So yeah, I'm really stoked to have her on to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. I am so intrigued by this. You know, my grandma, everyone calls her mom. Everyone, it doesn't. You could be like, she's at great for sure. She's probably at great. Who knows? But everyone still just calls her mom. Everyone. I'm not gonna tell. Like, she's only given me one piece of advice that I'm not gonna talk about on this podcast. But in my entire life, she sat me down one time, and it was, Matt, I'll tell you after. Okay. Some good advice. Very good advice to hear as a 17-year-old. 17-year-old boy. Definitely was. Yo, so what that means is that y'all have to come back. You know, like what we're really saying is that we've like taken this hiatus, and we've taken it partly because of the things that have been going on in our life, but we see how much joy this brings to us, and hopefully it brings something to you, whatever it might be. It is what it is. But we're excited for this season. We're excited for the new lineup, and we literally can't wait to see what happens from this. We're excited. We are excited. Thank you, and we will see you next time.
Absolutely.
Peace.